pre-mix something already. And directions and some exposure times are in the box with it. So that'll help at least, or at least guide you in a proper direction. But we'll You can just, what I'd say is get a small thermometer and keep it in there and just try not to roast them at 120, 130 or even higher, you know. 100 degrees is okay. You know, usually 90, 95 is going to be able to do it.
It's not going to affect your actual, once you burn the image? Okay.
One of the things is you don't want to go hot like that. Through the process, because sometimes when you put the film to it, depending on tension of the fabric, you could change registration a little bit because it's elongated through heat, and then you hit it with cold water and it'll shrink back. And if that screen started it at a different tension than another one was, you could get it, you know, two films that may not match up later on. So trying to just be consistent. Try to check tension if you can. So in this time period, if you were waiting for something to degas, is what that term is, to let the air come out of it, what you can do is prep your screens. So you'll get new frames from Ryan that are much like this, that have mesh on them, that are ready to go. What I recommend is degreasing this, strictly for the reason that it's traveled distance to get here. It's been in the back of a truck. There's dust on it. When the mesh is made through the process, it's like a loom. And everybody's seen a loom. Well, you have a reed going back and forth. Well, they put silicone and oils on that reed to make sure it will flow even through the mesh when they do that. So you'll get a little bit of that still in the fiber. So you want to make sure you get all that stuff off. In the chemical kits we sell, there's a degreaser in there. So basically, I don't know if you guys want to step forward if you can. Basically what we would do is put it into the sink. The neutralize that's in a lot of the starter kits that we sell, it's about a 5-to-1 type degreaser product. We pre-mix it in a squirt bottle or a spray bottle. I prefer to do like a pop top on whatever I'm using because I think that it gets a little more onto the screen, less atomization, and and whenever you spray something, you're losing about 30% anyway. So it's a more direct flow type. So just apply a little bit to the mesh. Scrub brush that's in your supplied kit, or you can buy them through Ryonet. Just suds it up. And you can get it wet beforehand, it'll make it a little bit easier. And I kind of like a XY type motion to make sure you're getting both sides of the square of the fiber. And then just rinse. And make sure you get the frame, and what you'll get a lot of times whenever you're washing the screen is you'll get a lot of foam and stuff that'll stay on this frame rail on the top. You want to make sure that you either flip the screen around or make sure that you get that frame. Because otherwise, when you stick it into your drying cabinet or whatever, you could transfer product from the sink to your drying cabinet, and then that'll drip onto your mesh, and you could have a fisheye or something like that from just doing chemical transfer. So you want to make sure you just rinse the frame real well. Let them drain a bit. You can take a rag and wipe the frame, but you don't want to really touch the mesh once it's gone to this point, because you have hand oil on your skin, or skin oil, I should say, and you'll transfer that onto the fabric. So let it dry, and then what I do is just stick it into a rack. And what I like to do is if you're gonna build a screen drying area, what I would like is you do coated screens horizontal, and you take wet screens that are coming from reclaim or degreasing or whatever, and you dry those vertical. And you could either put a fan above it, or you can cant them a little bit more, but you want to get some gravity into the screen so that you're trying to get more water off it in a faster fashion. So that's set to dry. So what we can do is talk a little bit about what a screen is and what we're going to do when we coat it. One of the things what we want to do is, if you're looking at the horizontal view of a screen here, is your squeegees above, you'd put ink into the trough area, and you're going to print through it. Well, what we want to be able to do when we coat this is we want to be able to create a gasket here to be able to hold the ink back, so that when we expose it with the image, we're just going to transfer the image that we want. Now, when you go to coat that, you'll start on the back side of the screen here with one coat, and then you'll go to the other side, and depending on your mesh count or the side of the scoop coater you're using, and I'll show you the scoop coater in a minute, but one side has a sharp edge, one side has a round edge. The round edge will give you more product, the sharp edge gives you less product. So depending on how you're coating and which technique you use, that will determine whether it's one on the top or two on the top, or if you started and you went 2 over 2. If you want to really build up stencil, if you're printing like a opaque white or something like that, maybe you even want to go to 3 over 2. It just depends on how much deposit you want to try to get onto the shirt. And the reason why we create gasket is because if you transfer the gasket to the other side, and let's say you reverse your coating technique, what happens when you have mesh, let's say you want to print a halftone pattern, and you have a dot like that. If you don't have the gasket on this side, and you're transferring the ink through the mesh and pushing it into the gasket area, if you don't do that, then you see how much grid is there. What happens when you do a method like this, when you go to release that screen off the print, you're going to pull all this mesh through that dot. So then what it does is it takes the dot from round like you see it there, and now this dot starts to look like this, or it's broken. And then what happens is now your print, when you go to print it, doesn't have that nice crisp clean clarity that you want, and the edges look a little fuzzy and everything just kind of looks muddy and it doesn't look clean. A lot of that starts right here and being able to transfer from the film to the emulsion the best you can. And trying to do that has a lot to do with the relationship between mesh and the emulsion. Any questions? Okay. So that it's important to create that gasket.
Well, when you're saying gasket, but you're still doing both sides, right?
Yeah, still doing both sides, but what we do is when we go to coat the screen.
So when you're back side of the gasket, you mean which one you're doing first?
Say again?
You mean which one you're doing first?
No, first, all you're doing is, when you go to coat this, you're filling the mesh. And one of the things I want you guys to do is, I don't want you to coat real fast. Because what happens is you've got mesh area here, and in that grid, you're trying to fill that grid and get through it, okay? If you do that fast, what can happen is you'll just skate over all those openings, and you could, depending on how fast the speed is, you could come back on the other side and coat air right into the mesh. So you want to make sure you're at an even pace. I like kind of a pace about like that, nothing too fast, and be consistent. That's the biggest thing. Is if you're gonna have one pace that you coat with all the time, try to be consistent and do the same thing over and over. And what that'll do is, if you have to rerun a job that's got halftone in it or fine detail, fine lines, you'll have repeatability. And that's the thing about printing, is having good repeatability, being able to print one after another, and get the same effect. So a lot of that has to do with how you coat that frame for continually printing. So what we'll do, and we'll do this right after this, is we will coat from the print side, the substrate side, first, because we want to fill the screen, and then we will turn that around and we will start to create gasket. And what I like to do is coat one to fill the screen, so we've got emulsion in the mesh and we filled it, and then one more to create the gasket and transfer product to the other side and create this.
Do you do it back to back, or do they have to dry?
No, you go right to back to back, wet on wet.
Basically, what you're doing is forcing emulsion through the screen.
Yep. Almost every time you go to coat, almost the result of everything you're doing in that coat is going to the other side. So you always start on the print side, go to the squeegee side, and coat there as well. Questions?